I was halfway through folding laundry when my phone buzzed. Just a soft vibration against the wooden table. Nothing urgent, nothing dramatic. The kind of sound that usually means a reminder or a store promotion. I'll delete without reading. I wiped my hands on the edge of the towel and reached for it absent-mindedly, already thinking about what I still needed to do before bed. But when I saw the name on the screen, I smiled without meaning to. Emma. No matter how old your child gets, there's a part of you that never stops reacting to their name the same way. A small lift in your chest, like the beginning of a sigh you didn't know you were holding. She had been busy lately, wrapped up in wedding plans, and I assumed she was probably calling to ask about something small, flowers maybe, or seating charts, or whether I thought ivory looked better than cream. I opened the message, and just like that, the world tilted. Don't you dare come to my wedding. My husband says you're not family anymore. For a moment I couldn't breathe. The words didn't feel real at first. They sat there on the screen, flat and ordinary, as if they didn't carry the weight of 32 years behind them. I read it again, slower this time, waiting for some hidden meaning to appear, for context to soften the edges. But the message didn't change. A strange quiet settled over the room. Not peaceful, not comforting. Heavy. Like the air had thickened and every sound had been pushed far away. 32 years of raising her alone. And I was a stranger. I didn't cry. Shock has a way of freezing tears before they can fall, like your body knows you need time before the pain can fully land. I set the phone down carefully on the table and stood there, staring at nothing, feeling something deep inside me go very still. Across the room, the clock ticked steadily, indifferent to the moment unfolding beneath it. Tick, tick, tick. Just last month, Emma had been sitting at my kitchen table laughing about invitations. Just last month, she hugged me goodbye and said, "I don't know what I'd do without you, Mom." Now, I wasn't family. I picked up the phone again, not to respond, but because I suddenly needed to see the words one more time, as if confirming their existence would somehow make them easier to understand. They looked the same. Cold. Final. My thumb hovered over the keyboard, but no reply came. What do you even say to something like that? How do you respond when a sentence erases a lifetime? Instead, I locked the screen and placed the phone face down. For a long moment, I stood there listening to the quiet hum of the house, the refrigerator cycling on, the faint creak of the floorboards settling, the distant sound of a car passing outside. Ordinary sounds continue as if nothing had changed. But everything had. I walked slowly to the sink and ran the tap, watching the water flow over my hands without really feeling it. My reflection in the window looked unfamiliar, older somehow, like the last few minutes had added years instead of seconds. Finally, I dried my hands and walked back to the table. The laptop sat open where I'd left it earlier. A tab still open to the wedding planning spreadsheet Emma and I had been updating together just weeks ago. I stared at the numbers, deposits, confirmations, totals. The resort. The catering. The photographer. $35,000. Money I had sent with pride, believing I was helping build one of the happiest days of her life. If I weren't family, why was I still paying for the celebration? The thought didn't come with anger. Came with clarity. I logged into my banking app, my fingers steady now in a way they hadn't been a few minutes earlier. One by one I canceled the payments. Each confirmation appeared quietly on the screen. Small digital acknowledgments marking the end of something much larger than money. When I finished, I closed the laptop and sat down, letting out a slow breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. Not revenge. Not punishment. Just a boundary. That night I didn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling while shadows from passing cars drifted across the walls, memories rising one by one like photographs floating to the surface of water. Emma, at 3 years old, was standing in the hallway, clutching her stuffed rabbit after a nightmare. Emma was 8, sitting at the kitchen table doing homework while I made dinner after a double shift. Emma was 16, crying after her first heartbreak, while I held her and promised she would be okay. Emma, at 18, had tears in her eyes when she opened her college acceptance letter. 32 years of love poured into one small life. And somehow it had all led here. Around sunrise, I finally gave up on sleep and went to the kitchen, pouring a cup of coffee that went cold in my hands while the sky slowly turned from gray to pale blue. The house felt different in the morning light. Quieter, like it was waiting for something. At a little after 7, I heard a car door slam outside. My heart jumped before I could stop it. I walked slowly to the window and looked out. Emma was standing at the end of the path, her arms wrapped tightly around herself like she was trying to hold something together. Her hair was pulled back hastily, her face pale, eyes red and swollen, as if she hadn't slept either. For a moment all I saw was my little girl, the one who used to run to me when she was scared. Then she walked up to the door and knocked. 3 quick knocks. I stood there with my hand resting on the doorknob, feeling 2 versions of myself pulling in opposite directions. The mother who wanted to open the door and make everything okay, and the woman who needed to understand why she had been pushed away. I opened the door. "Mom," she said, her voice trembling. "What did you do?" I stepped back just enough to let the morning light fall between us. "What do you mean?" I asked quietly. "The venue called Jake this morning," she said, words tumbling over each other. "The payments are gone. The caterer too. Everything is falling apart." There it was. Not an apology. Not an explanation. Just panic. "You told me not to come," I said gently. "You said I wasn't family." Her face crumpled. "I didn't mean it like that. I was upset." I studied her face, searching for the girl I knew beneath the fear. Upset enough to say something like that? She looked away, tears gathering in her eyes. "The wedding is in 3 weeks, she whispered. "I don't know what we're going to do." And in that moment something inside me broke quietly. Not with anger but with understanding. She wasn't here because she missed me. She was here because she needed something. I felt the realization settle slowly, like dust drifting through sunlight. "I think," I said softly, "we need to talk about what's really going on." She nodded, wiping her cheeks. I stepped aside and let her in, closing the door gently behind us, knowing that whatever conversation came next would change our lives in ways neither of us could yet imagine. Emma stepped inside slowly, like she wasn't sure she still belonged there. For a moment she just stood in the entryway, looking around the house as if it were both familiar and foreign at the same time. The morning light spilled across the hardwood floors, catching dust motes drifting lazily through the air, and I wondered if she noticed how nothing had changed. Not the furniture, not the photos on the wall, not the faint scent of coffee that always seemed to linger in the kitchen. Everything was the same. Except us. "Do you want some coffee?" I asked quietly. It felt strange to say something so normal when nothing about the moment felt normal at all. But habits formed over decades don't disappear overnight. She nodded without meeting my eyes. "Okay." I turned toward the kitchen, grateful for the small pause it gave me. The familiar rhythm of filling the kettle, setting out mugs, and reaching for the coffee tin steadied my hands in a way words couldn't. Behind me, I could hear her shifting her weight from one foot to the other, the soft rustle of her jacket, the sound of someone unsure of where to stand. When I placed the mug in front of her at the table, she wrapped her hands around it like she was trying to warm herself from the inside out. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The silence wasn't hostile. It was fragile. Finally, she took a breath. "Mom, I shouldn't have said that." Her voice was barely above a whisper. I sat across from her, folding my hands loosely on the table. "Why did you?" She stared into her coffee, watching the steam rise. "Jake and I fought. Things got heated. He said you didn't respect our relationship, that you were always trying to control everything." The words landed softly but heavily, like snow that looks gentle until it begins to pile up. "I see," I said. She glanced up quickly as if expecting anger, but I kept my voice calm. "I never said I agreed with him," she added quickly. "I was just upset. Upset enough to tell your mother she isn't family?" Her eyes filled with tears again. "I didn't mean it like that." I studied her face, the tired eyes, the tightness around her mouth, the way her shoulders seemed slightly hunched like she was carrying something invisible and heavy. "When did everything get so complicated?" I asked softly. She let out a shaky breath. "I don't know." The clock ticked quietly on the wall, measuring the space between us in seconds neither of us knew how to fill. "Tell me about the fight," I said. She hesitated. "It was about the guest list. Jake thinks the wedding should be smaller, more private. He says big family events create drama. And he thinks I'm drama?" She didn't answer, which was answer enough. I felt a small ache spread through my chest, not sharp, just steady. "Emma," I said gently, "you've known me your entire life. Do you really believe that?" Her fingers tightened around the mug. He just worries things will get tense. His family is very formal, very particular. He wants everything to be perfect. Perfect. Such a dangerous word. And you? I asked. What do you want? She looked up then, her expression flickering with something I couldn't quite name. Uncertainty maybe, or fear. I just want everyone to get along. I nodded slowly. That sounds exhausting. She gave a small humorless laugh. You have no idea. We sat quietly again, and I could feel something unspoken hovering just beneath the surface, like a conversation waiting for permission to begin. Why haven't I met his parents yet? I asked finally. Her eyes flickered. They travel a lot. And Jake? What about him? I've only met him once briefly, and that was 6 months ago at that cafe. Since then, every time I suggest dinner or visiting, something comes up. She shifted in her seat. He's just busy with work. Emma. I didn't raise my voice, but she looked up immediately. I'm not accusing anyone, I said calmly. I'm trying to understand why my daughter suddenly feels like a stranger to me. Her eyes filled again, and this time the tears spilled over. I don't know how to make everyone happy, she whispered. There it was. Not anger. Pressure. I reached across the table and placed my hand gently over hers. She didn't pull away. You don't have to make everyone happy, I said softly. You just have to be honest. Her shoulders trembled slightly, and for a moment I saw the little girl she used to be. The one who used to come to me when the world felt too big. But then her phone buzzed on the table, and the moment broke. She glanced at the screen, and I saw the subtle shift in her posture immediately. The way her back straightened, the tension returning like a curtain being pulled back into place. Jake, she said quietly. She answered. Hi, yeah, I'm here. I watched her face as she listened. The way her expression moved from nervous to defensive to careful neutrality. No, we're just talking. I know. I'll figure it out. Her voice was softer now, almost apologetic. After a few seconds she hung up and set the phone down, avoiding my eyes. What did he say? I asked gently. Just checking in. I nodded, though we both knew that wasn't the whole truth. Emma, I said, choosing my words carefully, are you happy? The question seemed to catch her off guard. Of course I am, she said quickly. But the answer came too fast, like a reflex instead of a truth. I didn't challenge it. Instead I leaned back slightly and said, you know, happiness shouldn't feel like something you have to defend. She looked at me then, really looked, and for a brief moment something softened in her eyes. I just want this wedding to be over, she admitted quietly. Everything feels like it's balancing on a knife's edge. I felt a chill run through me at the words, though the kitchen was warm. That's not how the beginning of a marriage should feel, I said. She didn't respond. Instead she stood slowly, wiping her cheeks. I should go. Jake's waiting. Of course he was. I walked her to the door, the same path I'd walked with her thousands of times over the years, to school, to friends' houses, to new chapters of her life. She paused on the porch, looking like she wanted to say something more. Mom, I am sorry. I know, I said softly. She nodded, then turned and walked to her car. I stood in the doorway watching her drive away, the morning sun glinting off the windshield until the car disappeared around the corner. The house felt quiet again, but not peaceful. Thoughtful. I closed the door slowly and leaned against it, letting out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. Something wasn't right. Not just the message. Not just the fight. Something deeper, something I couldn't quite see yet, like a shadow moving just out of view. I walked back into the kitchen and sat at the table, staring at the 2 mugs, one empty, one still half full, and felt a quiet certainty settle over me. Whatever was happening in Emma's life, I wasn't seeing the whole picture. And for the first time since she was born, I had the uneasy feeling that my daughter might be standing at the edge of something she didn't fully understand. For the rest of that morning, the house felt strangely hollow, like a conversation had started but never finished. I washed the mugs slowly, watching the water swirl down the drain, replaying every word Emma had said, and every word she hadn't. Pressure. That was the word that stayed with me. She looked like someone trying to keep a delicate balance, like one wrong move might send everything crashing down. By early afternoon, I found myself sitting in the living room, staring at nothing in particular, when the sound of a car pulling into the driveway broke the quiet. I wasn't expecting anyone. I stood and walked to the window. A dark gray sedan sat in the driveway, engine still running. A moment later, the driver's door opened and Jake stepped out. Even from a distance, he carried himself with an easy confidence, the kind that looked natural until you paid closer attention and realized it was carefully practiced. He straightened his jacket, glanced briefly at his reflection in the car window, then walked toward the house with a measured stride. I felt a subtle tightening in my chest. Not fear. Awareness. A few seconds later, the doorbell rang. I opened the door. "Margaret," he said with a polite smile, his voice smooth and controlled. "I hope I'm not interrupting anything." His tone suggested he already knew he wasn't. "Hello, Jake," I replied calmly. "What can I do for you?" He clasped his hands lightly in front of him, like someone about to deliver a presentation. "I wanted to talk about this morning," he said. "Emma is very upset." I stepped aside, allowing him in, though something inside me remained quietly guarded. He walked into the living room and looked around briefly, taking in the framed photos, the bookshelf, the familiar details of a life built over decades. "It's a lovely home," he said. "Thank you." We sat across from each other, the same place where Emma and I had sat countless times before, though the air felt different now, more formal, more careful. Jake leaned forward slightly. "I think there's been a misunderstanding," he began. "Emma didn't mean what she said. She was emotional." I nodded slowly. "I gathered that." He smiled, relieved at my calm tone. "Weddings are stressful," he continued. "There's a lot of pressure, a lot of expectations. People say things they don't mean." "That's true," I said. "But they usually apologize for them." His smile flickered just for a second before returning. "She feels terrible," he said. "She just doesn't know how to fix things right now." I studied his face, the steady eye contact, the measured tone, the careful choice of words. "And you?" I asked. "What do you think?" "I think family should support each other," he said smoothly. "Especially during important moments like this." The irony didn't escape me. "I agree," I said quietly. He relaxed slightly, as if he believed the conversation was moving in the direction he wanted. "I also think," he continued, "that canceling the wedding payments was a bit extreme." There it was. Not concerned. Not empathy. Just the real reason he was here. "I was told I wasn't family," I said calmly. I adjusted accordingly. He exhaled slowly, leaning back. "Margaret, I understand you were hurt," he said. "But actions like that create unnecessary chaos. Emma is under tremendous stress now." "I imagine she is," I said. He paused, studying me more carefully now, like he was recalibrating. "My intention has always been to keep things peaceful," he said. "But sometimes boundaries are necessary to protect a relationship." "Boundaries are very important," I agreed. Another flicker of surprise crossed his face. "But they should go both ways," I added gently. For the first time, the polished ease slipped slightly, revealing something sharper beneath. "I'm not sure what you mean," he said. I replied evenly. "Telling someone they're not family is a boundary. Canceling payments is another." Silence settled between us, thick but controlled. Jake straightened his posture. "I think we both want what's best for Emma," he said finally. "Of course," I said. "And what's best for her is a peaceful wedding," he continued. "A fresh start without tension. A fresh start built on honesty," I said softly. He held my gaze for a moment longer than necessary, and I could almost see the calculation behind his eyes, weighing words, adjusting strategy. Then he smiled again. "I'm glad we understand each other," he said, standing. "I'm sure we can move forward positively from here." I stood as well. "I hope so," I said. We walked toward the door together. Before stepping outside, he paused. "Emma loves you," he said. "She just wants this to be perfect." "I know," I said quietly. He nodded once, then walked back to his car. I watched him drive away, the quiet hum of the engine fading down the street, leaving the house still once more. But the stillness felt different now. He had been polite, respectful, measured, and yet, something about the conversation felt rehearsed, like lines delivered from memory rather than truth. I closed the door and stood there for a moment, listening to the silence settle again. Then I walked slowly back into the living room and sat down, my mind replaying every word, every pause, every shift in tone. There had been no anger, no accusations, just a subtle insistence that everything should return to normal, without ever addressing why things had changed in the first place. And that, more than anything, unsettled me. Because real peace doesn't come from avoiding the truth. Comes from facing it. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the afternoon light stretching across the floor, and felt a quiet certainty begin to form. Not yet a conclusion, just the faint outline of a realization. Jake wasn't just trying to smooth things over. He was trying to control the narrative. And for the first time, I wondered whether the distance I'd been feeling from Emma wasn't accidental at all. After Jake left, the house felt different. Not empty exactly, just quieter in a way that made every small sound stand out. The faint hum of the refrigerator, the ticking clock, the soft rustle of the curtains when a breeze slipped through the window. I stayed in the living room long after his car disappeared down the street, replaying the conversation in my mind like a scene from a film I couldn't pause. Every word had been polite, every sentence reasonable, and yet something about it felt off, like a smile that never quite reaches someone's eyes. By evening, the sky had turned the soft gray blue that always comes just before sunset, and I found myself at the kitchen table with a notebook open in front of me, not because I had planned to write anything, but because sitting still felt impossible. I wrote one word at the top of the page. Emma. Then underneath it, I began listing small things I hadn't allowed myself to think about before. Shorter phone calls. Missed visits. Excuses. The way her voice sounded was guarded. I paused, tapping the pen lightly against the paper, remembering the subtle tension I'd felt the last time we spoke before the message, like she was choosing her words carefully instead of speaking freely. I flipped to a new page. Jake. Polite. Controlled. Careful with words. I stopped writing and leaned back, staring at the ceiling. None of these things alone meant anything, but together they formed a pattern I couldn't ignore anymore. I closed the notebook slowly. For the first time, I allowed myself to wonder if Emma wasn't just stressed, if she was overwhelmed in a way she didn't know how to explain. The thought sat heavily in my chest. That night, I slept lightly, waking several times to the quiet darkness of the room, my mind turning over the same question again and again. Is she happy? The next morning, I woke with a strange sense of determination, as something inside me had shifted during the night. I made coffee, sat by the window, and opened my laptop. The wedding folder stared back at me. Spreadsheets, confirmations, guest lists. I opened the budget file, scanning the numbers more carefully than I ever had before. Everything had been organized meticulously: dates, payments, notes. But one thing stood out immediately. Several expenses had been changed in the past 2 weeks. Upgraded venue package. Additional catering services. Luxury transportation. I frowned, scrolling slowly. Emma had never mentioned any of these changes. The total cost had increased significantly, far beyond what we originally discussed. A faint unease spread through me, not because of the money itself but because she hadn't told me. Emma had always been open about things like this. Until now. I sat back, staring at the screen, and felt a quiet realization settle over me. Something wasn't just changing. It had already changed. Later that afternoon, my phone rang. Emma's name lit up the screen again. I answered immediately. "Hi," I said softly. Her voice sounded tired. "Hi, Mom." We sat in a brief silence before she spoke again. "I talked to Jake," she said. I waited. "He thinks maybe we should take a step back for a few days," she continued. "Just let things cool down." "And what do you think?" I asked gently. I think I just want everything to stop feeling so tense," she admitted. Her voice sounded small, like she was speaking from far away. "Emma," I said quietly, "are you overwhelmed?" She hesitated. "Maybe," she whispered. The word felt heavier than anything she'd said before. "You know you can talk to me," I said. "I know," she replied quickly, but there was a tremor in her voice that told me she didn't feel as certain as she sounded. We talked for a few more minutes about small things, the weather, errands, nothing important, until she said she had to go. After the call ended, I sat staring at the phone, feeling the distance between us more sharply than ever. That evening, I walked through the house slowly, pausing at the framed photos lining the hallway. Emma at graduation. Emma is on vacation. Emma was laughing at the kitchen table. Each picture felt like a reminder of a version of her that seemed just slightly out of reach now. I stopped at the last photo, the two of us at her college graduation, arms around each other, both smiling with the kind of effortless joy that comes from certainty. I touched the edge of the frame lightly. When did certainty turn into doubt? The question lingered long after I walked away. Over the next few days, the silence between us grew heavier. Emma texted occasionally. Short messages, polite updates, nothing personal. Jake didn't contact me again. But his presence felt constant, like a shadow stretching across conversations, even when he wasn't mentioned. One afternoon, while sorting through old mail, I came across an envelope addressed to Emma that had been accidentally delivered to my house weeks earlier. I hadn't opened it at the time, assuming she'd pick it up eventually, but now something about it caught my attention. It was from a financial institution. My chest tightened slightly as I stared at it. I set it back down immediately. It was in my place. But the unease lingered, a quiet reminder that there were parts of her life I didn't fully understand anymore. That night, as I sat by the window watching the last light fade from the sky, a thought settled into my mind with unexpected clarity. Love isn't just about being there when things are easy. It's about paying attention when something feels wrong. And for the first time since the message arrived, I realized this wasn't just about a wedding or hurt feelings. It was about my daughter standing at the beginning of a life that didn't feel steady beneath her feet. I didn't know exactly what was happening yet, but I knew one thing with absolute certainty. I couldn't ignore it anymore. The tension didn't explode all at once. It built slowly like pressure behind a closed door. Quiet, invisible, but impossible to ignore once you knew it was there. For nearly a week after our last conversation, Emma's messages stayed polite but distant. Short updates about errands, small talk about the weather, nothing that felt real. It was like speaking to someone through a wall. Then on a gray Thursday afternoon, my phone rang. Emma. I answered immediately. Her voice was tight, almost breathless. Mom. Can you come over? My heart skipped. Of course. Is everything okay? A pause. Just please come. I didn't ask anything else. The drive to her apartment felt longer than usual. The sky heavy with low clouds that made everything look muted and uncertain. My hands tightened slightly on the steering wheel as a quiet dread settled in my chest. When I pulled into the parking lot, I could see her standing near the entrance, arms wrapped around herself like she was trying to stay upright. She looked smaller somehow. I stepped out of the car, and before I could say anything, she walked toward me quickly. Hi, she said, forcing a faint smile that didn't reach her eyes. Hi, sweetheart, I said gently. Inside, the apartment felt tense, the air thick with something unspoken. The living room looked perfectly arranged, almost too neat, like everything had been put back into place after a storm. Jake stood near the window. He turned as we entered, offering the same practiced smile I had seen before. Margaret, he said. Thank you for coming. I nodded. Emma sounded upset. She sat on the edge of the couch, hands clasped tightly in her lap. Jake remained standing, his posture relaxed but alert. We thought it would be good to talk together, he said smoothly. The phrasing felt deliberate. Together. As if this were a meeting instead of a family conversation. I sat in the chair across from them, the space between us feeling larger than the room itself. Emma took a breath. Mom, things have been really stressful. I can see that, I said softly. Jake stepped forward slightly. The wedding is only 2 weeks away, he said. And the financial situation has created a lot of pressure. There it was again, the focus on logistics instead of emotions. I understand, I replied calmly. Emma looked at me, eyes searching. We just want things to feel normal again. Normal. Such a simple word for something that felt so far away. What does normal look like to you? I asked gently. She hesitated. Just no tension. Everyone is getting along. Jake nodded. Exactly. Silence settled for a moment, heavy but expectant. Then he spoke again, his tone still smooth but firmer now. We think the best way forward is to reset, he said. Move past misunderstandings and focus on the future. I studied his face. And how do you suggest we do that? His eyes held mine steadily. By reinstating the wedding payments, he said. The words landed quietly but decisively, like a piece sliding into place. Emma looked down immediately, her shoulders tightening. So this was the purpose of the meeting. Not reconciliation. Resolution on their terms. I see, I said. Jake continued, his tone measured. It would relieve a lot of pressure for Emma, and it would show that we're all moving forward together. I turned my attention to her. Is that what you want? She swallowed hard. I just want the fighting to stop. The honesty in her voice hurt more than anything else, because she wasn't asking for support. She was asking for peace. And peace, I realized, had been replaced by tension she didn't know how to escape. Emma, I said gently, do you feel like you're being pulled in two directions? Her eyes filled instantly, but she didn't answer. Jake stepped in quickly. She's under a lot of pressure, he said. We all are. I looked back at him. Pressure from what? He paused just slightly. From conflict, he said. I held his gaze. Conflict doesn't appear on its own. For the first time, his expression tightened. Margaret, he said, a hint of impatience slipping through. We're trying to be practical. And I'm trying to be honest, I replied calmly. Emma's voice trembled. Please don't fight. I softened immediately. I'm not fighting, sweetheart. But Jake exhaled sharply, the mask slipping just enough to reveal frustration beneath. This is exactly what I was worried about, he said. Every conversation turns into an interrogation. The room went very still. I felt a quiet clarity settle over me. I'm asking questions because I care, I said. And I'm trying to protect our relationship, he replied. The words sounded reasonable, but the tone felt defensive. Emma looked between us, eyes wide with tension. I can't do this, she whispered. The words hung in the air like a fragile thread about to snap. I leaned forward slightly. You don't have to choose sides, Emma. Jake's jaw tightened. She already has, he said quietly. The sentence landed like a stone dropping into water. Emma's face went pale. That's not fair, she said softly. But the damage was done. The room felt smaller, the air heavier. I stood slowly, my heart steady despite the ache spreading through my chest. I think we all need some space, I said gently. Emma looked up, panic flickering in her eyes. Mom, I'm not leaving, I said softly. I'm just stepping back. Jake nodded once, satisfied in a way he tried to hide. But as I walked toward the door, I felt something settle inside me. Not defeat, not anger, but certainty. Something wasn't right here. And pretending everything was fine wouldn't fix it. Outside, the cool air felt sharp against my skin, grounding me in a way the apartment hadn't. I walked to my car slowly, the weight of the conversation pressing heavily on my chest. Through the window, I could see Emma standing near the couch, shoulders slumped, while Jake spoke quietly beside her. She looked trapped between two worlds. And for the first time, I felt the unmistakable realization take hold. This wasn't just wedding stress. This was something deeper. Something fragile. Something that could break if no one acknowledged it. I sat in the driver's seat for a moment before starting the engine, staring straight ahead as the rain began to fall lightly against the windshield. Love, I realized, isn't always about fixing things. Sometimes it's about recognizing when something is broken, even if the person you love isn't ready to see it yet. As I drove away, one thought stayed with me, steady and unshakable. The truth hadn't fully surfaced yet, but it was coming. And when it did, everything would change. The rain followed me home that afternoon, a soft, steady drizzle that blurred the edges of the world outside my windshield. I sat in the driveway for a long moment after turning off the engine, listening to the quiet ticking of the cooling metal and the gentle tap of raindrops against the roof. Inside my chest, something felt heavy but clear, like a decision waiting to be acknowledged. The conversation at Emma's apartment replayed in my mind, every pause and glance echoing louder now that I was alone. Jake's calm insistence, Emma's trembling voice, the way the room felt like a place where truth struggled to breathe. I stepped out of the car and walked slowly into the house, the familiar scent of wood and coffee wrapping around me like a memory. For a moment I stood in the kitchen, hands resting on the counter, letting the quiet settle. Then my phone rang. An unfamiliar number. Normally I would have let it go to voicemail, but something made me answer. Hello. Is this Margaret Reeves? The woman's voice was cautious, almost hesitant. Yes, it is. My name is Caroline, she said. You don't know me, but I think we need to talk. It's about Jake. My breath caught. I'm listening. There was a pause on the line like she was gathering courage. I was engaged to him 3 years ago, she said quietly. The words landed slowly, like stones sinking through water. What? I saw Emma's wedding announcement online, she continued. When I saw his name, I knew I had to call you. I sank into a chair, my hand tightening around the phone. Tell me everything, I said softly. Caroline's story unfolded slowly, her voice steady but heavy with memories she clearly hadn't revisited lightly. Jake had been charming, attentive, perfect at first. They had gotten engaged quickly. But as the wedding approached, things changed. He became controlling, critical, distant. Then, when financial expectations shifted, he ended the engagement abruptly, leaving behind confusion and emotional wreckage. You're saying? I began slowly. This is a pattern? Yes, she said quietly. And Emma isn't the first. A chill ran through me despite the warmth of the room. Caroline told me about others, women who had similar experiences, the same charm, the same gradual isolation, the same sudden shift when control slipped. I have emails, she said. Messages. Proof. I kept everything. I closed my eyes, feeling the truth settle like a weight I couldn't ignore anymore. Can you send them to me? I already did, she replied gently. Check your email. After we hung up, I sat there for a long moment, staring at the blank wall in front of me, the quiet hum of the house suddenly louder than before. Then I opened my laptop. The email was there. Dozens of screenshots, messages, documents. I scrolled slowly, my heart pounding with each piece of evidence. The tone was unmistakable. The same smooth charm, the same subtle pressure, the same careful manipulation hidden beneath affection. By the time I reached the end, my hands were trembling. Not from shock, from clarity. Jake wasn't just difficult. He was dangerous. Not in a way that left visible scars, but in the way he slowly reshaped reality until the people around him doubted themselves. I closed the laptop gently and sat back, letting the silence settle around me. Emma didn't see it yet, but she would. The question was how. That night I barely slept, my mind turning over possibilities, searching for the right way to reach her without pushing her further away. By morning the rain had stopped, leaving the world washed clean, sunlight glinting off wet pavement like tiny mirrors. I made coffee and sat by the window, watching the neighborhood wake up, feeling a quiet determination settle in my chest. Emma needed the truth. Not accusations. Not anger. Just the truth. Around noon I called her. She answered on the second ring. Hi, Mom. Her voice sounded tired. Hi, sweetheart, I said gently. Can we talk? A pause. Okay. We met at a small park halfway between our homes. The kind of quiet place where conversations can happen without interruption. She sat beside me on a bench, arms folded tightly, eyes searching my face like she already sensed something was different. What's going on? She asked softly. I took a slow breath. I spoke to someone yesterday, I said. Someone who knows Jake. Her expression tightened instantly. Who? Her name is Caroline. She was engaged to him. Emma's face went pale. That's not possible, she said quickly. I have proof, I said gently. She shook her head, panic rising in her eyes. He told me about past relationships. They were complicated. I know, I said softly. But there's more. I handed her printed copies of the messages, watching her hands tremble as she took them. She read in silence, her breathing growing shallow, her eyes scanning line after line. Minutes passed. Finally she looked up, tears streaming down her face. I don't understand, she whispered. I reached for her hand. Sometimes people don't show us who they really are until we're already invested, I said quietly. She shook her head, grief and disbelief colliding in her expression. He wouldn't lie to me, she said, though her voice lacked conviction. Then talk to him, I said gently. Ask him about this. She nodded slowly, like someone trying to steady themselves after the ground shifts beneath their feet. As we sat there, the wind rustling softly through the trees, I felt the moment settle into something irreversible. The truth was no longer hidden. It was standing between us, waiting to be faced. The call came 2 days later. I knew it was coming the moment I saw Emma's name on my phone, the way you can sometimes feel a shift before a storm breaks. Her voice was barely above a whisper. "Mom, can you come over?" There was no panic this time, just exhaustion. "Of course," I said softly. The drive felt quieter than the last time I made it, the world outside moving at its usual pace while everything inside me felt suspended between before and after. When I reached her apartment, she opened the door before I could knock. Her eyes were swollen, her face pale, but there was a stillness in her expression that hadn't been there before. The kind that comes after something difficult finally settles into truth. Jake wasn't there. The absence was noticeable immediately, like a tension that had quietly left the room. She stepped aside to let me in, and we sat on the couch without speaking for a moment, the silence soft instead of strained. "I talked to him," she said finally. I waited. At first he denied everything, she continued, staring at her hands. Then he said it didn't matter because the past was the past. Then he got angry. Her voice cracked slightly. He said I was choosing you over him, that I was letting you manipulate me. I felt a familiar ache in my chest, but I kept my voice gentle. "How did that make you feel?" She looked up, tears slipping quietly down her cheeks. Like I didn't recognize him anymore. The words hung between us, heavy but honest. "I kept thinking about everything you said," she continued. "About honesty. About not having to defend happiness." She let out a shaky breath. "And I realized I haven't felt peaceful in months." I reached for her hand, squeezing it softly. "What happened next?" She wiped her cheeks. "I told him I needed space. He packed a bag and left. He said I'd regret it." Her voice trembled on the last sentence, and for a moment she looked very small, like the little girl who used to come to me after a bad dream. "I'm sorry," she whispered, "for everything I said. For pushing you away." I pulled her into my arms, holding her the way I had countless times before, feeling the tension slowly leave her shoulders as she cried. "There's nothing to be sorry for," I said softly. "You were trying to figure things out." "But I hurt you," she said. I leaned back slightly so she could see my face. "Love isn't about never hurting each other," I said gently. "It's about finding your way back." She nodded, tears still falling, but her breathing steadier now. For the first time in weeks, the room felt calm, not perfect, not magically healed, but honest. Over the next few days, Emma canceled the wedding plans. It wasn't dramatic. Just a series of phone calls and emails, each one closing a chapter she had once imagined differently. Jake sent messages at first, apologies, explanations, promises to change. Then anger. Then silence. Eventually, even the silence felt like peace. One afternoon, Emma came over to my house, and we sat at the kitchen table the way we used to, sunlight streaming through the window while we talked about everything and nothing at once. "I feel like I can finally breathe," she said quietly. I smiled. "That's how you know you made the right decision." She looked around the room, her expression soft. "I didn't realize how far away I drifted." "You came back," I said. She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "I always will." Weeks turned into months and life settled into a new rhythm. Quieter, steadier, built on a deeper understanding between us. Emma started seeing a counselor, wanting to understand why she ignored the warning signs, wanting to grow instead of just moving on. I admired her for that. Healing isn't always about forgetting. Sometimes it's about learning. Spring arrived slowly, the garden blooming again. Roses opening one by one like small reminders that life continues even after difficult seasons. One afternoon, Emma helped me plant new flowers, the two of us working side by side under a warm sun. "I'm grateful," she said suddenly. "For what?" I asked. "For you not giving up on me, even when I pushed you away." I smiled, brushing dirt from my hands. "That's what mothers do." She laughed softly. "I hope someday I can be that strong." "You already are," I said. We stood there for a moment, looking out at the garden, the quiet hum of bees drifting through the air, the world peaceful in a way that felt earned rather than given. Later that evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky in soft gold and pink, I sat by the window in my favorite chair, the same place where everything had begun months before. But the feeling was different now. The house felt warm again, full of quiet certainty instead of doubt. My phone buzzed softly beside me. A message from Emma. "Love you, Mom." I smiled, typing back, "Love you always." And as the evening settled gently around me, I realized something simple but powerful. Life doesn't always unfold the way we expect. Sometimes the storms come suddenly, shaking everything we thought was steady. But if we're willing to stand in the truth, even when it's uncomfortable, what remains afterward is often stronger, deeper, and more real than what came before. I leaned back in my chair, watching the last light fade from the sky, feeling a quiet peace settle in my chest. Not because everything had been easy, but because we had found our way through it together.